The technology and entertainment worlds are in complete shock tonight after what insiders are calling the most explosive psychological breakdown in late-night television history. Elon Musk, the revolutionary entrepreneur and tech visionary, went absolutely crazy on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, following a fiery clash that pushed him beyond every conceivable breaking point and exposed the dangerous consequences of systematic intellectual abuse. What should have been a professional discussion about innovation turned into a career-defining moment that revealed what happens when authentic genius is pushed to its absolute psychological limits by manufactured intellectual superiority. Make sure you smash that subscribe button because this story contains exclusive behind-the-scenes details that will make you question everything about how entertainment television treats brilliant minds. The shocking truth about what happens when relentless intellectual condescension meets revolutionary thinking goes deeper than anyone imagined, and we've got insider information that reveals the calculated psychological warfare disguised as sophisticated discourse. According to sources close to the production, Elon Musk had been in an unusually intense mental state for weeks leading up to this appearance, dealing with multiple crises across his companies while managing the enormous pressure of advancing human civilization on multiple fronts simultaneously. His team had specifically warned Stephen's producers that Musk was operating at maximum psychological capacity and needed a respectful, supportive interview environment, rather than the typical adversarial approach. Elon was already at his breaking point before he even got to the studio, revealed a longtime member of Musk's inner circle who witnessed the devastating aftermath. He'd been working 18-hour days on Mars colonization timelines, dealing with Tesla production challenges, managing Neuralink developments, and fighting regulatory battles on multiple fronts. His team explicitly told Stephen's people that he needed a supportive conversation, not intellectual combat. They promised this would be different, a respectful dialogue between two brilliant minds about humanity's future. The warning signs started appearing during the pre-interview coordination process, but they were disguised as Stephen's supposed intellectual preparation for engaging with one of the world's most complex minds. His producers seemed unusually interested in finding Musk's psychological pressure points, studying his most stressful public moments, and preparing what they described as challenging intellectual discourse that would test his mental resilience. They kept asking about Elon's stress responses, his reaction to criticism, his behavior under extreme pressure, explained a publicist familiar with the booking process. They claimed they wanted to explore how genius handles adversity, but it felt like they were developing a psychological attack strategy rather than planning a respectful interview. We thought Stephen wanted to understand how revolutionary minds work under pressure, not systematically apply that pressure for entertainment. Behind the scenes, crew members described an atmosphere that felt more like preparation for psychological warfare than a respectful interview with someone whose mental state was already at dangerous levels. Stephen was reportedly obsessing over Musk's most vulnerable moments, studying his responses to intense criticism, and preparing what staff described as a relentless series of intellectual challenges designed to push his psychological limits. Stephen had this massive research file about every time Elon had shown stress, frustration, or emotional intensity in public, recalled a production assistant who witnessed the disturbing preparations. But he wasn't studying it to understand the pressure of revolutionary leadership. He was looking for ways to systematically trigger those responses and push Elon beyond his breaking point for dramatic television. What made the situation even more dangerous was Stephen's well-documented pattern of using intellectual pressure as a weapon, particularly targeting brilliant individuals whose achievements threatened his position as the show's primary authority figure. Industry insiders revealed that the late-night host has a history of psychological manipulation disguised as intellectual discourse, viewing mental pressure as entertainment rather than recognizing the human cost of systematic psychological attack. Stephen has this thing about breaking down people who are smarter than him, explained a former show writer who left after becoming uncomfortable with the host's increasingly predatory psychological tactics. Elon represents everything Stephen wishes he could be. Genuinely revolutionary, actually changing the world, operating at levels of intensity and brilliance that Stephen can't comprehend. When he can't match someone intellectually, he tries to destroy them psychologically through relentless pressure and systematic mental abuse. The tension escalated when Musk arrived at the studio, bringing his characteristic intensity amplified by weeks of extreme stress and the enormous pressure of managing multiple world-changing projects simultaneously. Witnesses described the tech mogul as being in a heightened state of mental alertness, his analytical mind operating at maximum capacity while dealing with psychological pressure that would break most people. But Stephen's behavior during their pre-show meeting immediately raised red flags among staff who understood the dangerous psychological state Musk was already in. Elon was clearly operating at his mental limits, processing multiple complex problems simultaneously while trying to stay focused on the interview, observed a stage manager who's worked with countless high-stress guests. But Stephen was immediately probing for psychological weak points, asking rapid-fire questions about his company's challenges, his personal stress levels, his methods for handling criticism. It was like watching someone poke at a pressure cooker that was already at maximum capacity. Behind closed doors, makeup artists and wardrobe staff noticed that Stephen kept making comments designed to increase Musk's stress levels, questioning his decision-making under pressure, and suggesting that his intense work schedule might be affecting his judgment. He kept making remarks about Elon looking tired, asking if he was handling the pressure of multiple companies, questioning whether he was spreading himself too thin, revealed a makeup artist who worked with both men. Elon was trying to stay focused, but you could see his stress levels rising with every psychological probe. The backstage atmosphere grew increasingly tense as showtime approached. Musk, with his natural sensitivity to intellectual dishonesty and his already maxed-out mental capacity, began showing signs of extreme psychological pressure as he picked up on Stephen's systematic plan to push him beyond his breaking point. Meanwhile, Stephen was reportedly making final preparations for what crew members later described as a calculated psychological assault designed to trigger a complete mental breakdown. You could feel the psychological warfare building, described an audience coordinator who helped seat guests before the taping. Stephen was planning to systematically attack someone who was already operating at maximum mental capacity, to push a brilliant mind beyond its limits for dramatic television. It felt like watching someone prepare to torture genius itself for entertainment value. As the cameras prepared to roll and Musk took his position with his characteristic intensity now amplified to dangerous levels, production assistants were already expressing horror about what they feared was about to happen. The collision between Musk's maximum capacity mental state and Stephen's systematic psychological warfare was about to create a television moment that would expose the devastating consequences of intellectual abuse designed to destroy brilliant minds for entertainment. Nobody could have predicted just how relentlessly Stephen would attack someone's psychological limits, or how spectacularly Musk would break when pushed beyond every conceivable breaking point by systematic mental abuse. What unfolded next will be remembered as one of the most systematic displays of intellectual warfare designed to destroy a brilliant mind in television history. As the cameras rolled and Stephen delivered his opening monologue, viewers immediately sensed something predatory in his energy, the calculated malice of someone preparing to systematically dismantle a genius operating at maximum psychological capacity. When he introduced Elon Musk, his tone carried an undercurrent of barely concealed anticipation that made everyone who understands mental pressure feel sick to their stomachs. Please welcome a man who's trying to revolutionize everything at once, though some might wonder if he's biting off more than even the world's biggest brain can chew. Elon Musk. The introduction was loaded with psychological pressure that immediately signaled this wasn't going to be a supportive discussion with someone already at their mental limits. When Musk walked onto the stage with his characteristic intensity now, visibly amplified by extreme stress, the contrast between his maximum capacity mental state and Stephen's hidden psychological warfare agenda was disturbing to witness. The interview began with seemingly standard questions about Musk's latest projects, but viewers who understand psychological manipulation could see Stephen laying elaborate mental traps with surgical precision. Musk, with his natural tendency to process multiple complex problems simultaneously and his already maxed-out cognitive capacity, responded with the kind of intense focus that indicated someone operating at the absolute limits of human mental performance. You know, Elon, you're running Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, xAI. That's a lot of plates spinning at once, Stephen said with a smile that looked more like a predator circling wounded prey. Some people might wonder if you're spreading yourself too thin, if maybe your judgment is being affected by the sheer cognitive load you're carrying. Don't you ever worry that you're operating beyond human mental capacity? The way Stephen immediately questioned Musk's mental capacity and suggested his judgment was impaired was like a verbal assault on someone whose psychological state was already at dangerous levels. He had immediately attacked the foundation of Musk's confidence, his ability to mentally manage multiple world-changing projects while he was operating at maximum cognitive stress. Musk's eyes flashed with the intensity of someone whose core mental abilities had been questioned while operating at peak capacity. "Stephen, the problems I'm working on require this level of intensity," he replied with controlled focus, though his voice carried the edge of someone whose mental resources were being systematically attacked. Climate change, space colonization, AI safety. These aren't problems you can solve working part-time. They require total cognitive commitment. The response was pure Musk, defending his mental approach while already showing signs of the psychological pressure Stephen was applying. Any decent interviewer would have respected this dedication and supported someone clearly operating at their limits. But Stephen Colbert isn't interested in supporting genius, and what he did next revealed his complete commitment to systematic psychological destruction. "Total cognitive commitment, sure," Stephen said with mock concern that made several audience members shift uncomfortably. "Though I have to ask, and I hope you don't mind me being psychologically honest here, but when was the last time you slept 8 hours? When did you last take a vacation? Don't you think there's a point where intense dedication becomes, well, let's call it, concerning behavior patterns that might affect your decision-making?" The studio fell into uncomfortable silence. Stephen had just suggested that Musk's intense work ethic was pathological behavior that impaired his judgment, attacking his mental state while he was already operating at maximum psychological capacity. The cruel implication that dedication to saving human civilization was concerning mental behavior hit the air like an assault on everyone who had ever pushed themselves to their limits for something important. Those sitting close to the stage could see Musk's hands beginning to tremble slightly, a clear sign of someone operating at extreme mental stress who was now being systematically attacked at their most vulnerable psychological points. "Stephen, these problems won't solve themselves while I'm sleeping," he said with controlled intensity, though everyone could see his stress levels spiking. "Every day we delay on climate solutions. Every month we postpone Mars colonization. Every year we ignore AI safety. Those delays cost humanity its future." Stephen, apparently energized by having successfully increased Musk's psychological pressure, doubled down with the kind of calculated mental warfare that would push genius beyond its breaking point. "Humanity's future, right? Though let's talk about your track record with timelines and promises. Full self-driving next year, for how many years now? Mars colonization dates that keep getting pushed back? Don't you think there's a pattern here of someone whose mental state might be causing them to make unrealistic commitments they can't deliver on?" The attack on Musk's credibility combined with questioning his mental state was breathtaking in its calculated psychological cruelty. Stephen had just suggested that Musk's revolutionary achievements were evidence of impaired judgment, while systematically increasing the psychological pressure on someone already operating at dangerous mental levels. Musk sat perfectly still, for what felt like an eternity, his legendary analytical mind processing the systematic attack on his mental capacity while operating at maximum cognitive stress levels. Stephen, those timelines reflect the difficulty of solving problems that have never been solved before, Musk said, his voice taking on the dangerous edge that comes from someone whose psychological limits were being systematically tested. But I notice you're more interested in attacking my mental state than discussing the solutions themselves. Why is that? But Stephen wasn't interested in solutions or basic human psychology. He was interested in pushing brilliant minds beyond their breaking points for entertainment value, and he wasn't finished with his systematic psychological assault on someone already at their mental limits. Mental state, interesting phrase, Stephen said with a smirk that revealed his true psychological predator nature. Speaking of which, let's talk about your social media behavior. The erratic posting schedules, the controversial statements, the public feuds. Don't you think there might be a connection between the enormous psychological pressure you're under and these, let's call them impulse control issues that seem to be getting worse? The suggestion that Musk's authentic communication was evidence of deteriorating impulse control was so fundamentally cruel that several audience members looked genuinely disturbed. Stephen had just pathologized someone's attempt to communicate directly, while systematically increasing their psychological pressure to dangerous levels. Musk's famous analytical composure was hanging by a thread now as he processed the systematic attack on his mental health while operating at maximum cognitive capacity. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the controlled fury of someone whose psychological limits were being deliberately pushed by someone whose only expertise was psychological warfare disguised as intellectual discourse. "You know what, Stephen?" he said slowly, his voice getting quieter but somehow more dangerous as his mental pressure reached critical levels. "I came here thinking we were going to discuss solving humanity's biggest challenges. Instead, you're systematically attacking my psychological state while I'm trying to prevent human extinction. What does that say about your priorities?" The rebuke hung in the air like a judgment on everything Stephen represented, and for a moment it seemed like the host might realize he was pushing someone beyond their psychological breaking point. But instead of showing any trace of human decency, he made the mistake that would trigger the most spectacular mental breakdown in television history. What happened next will be remembered as one of the most spectacular displays of brilliant genius pushed beyond all psychological limits in television history. Stephen's systematic attack on Musk's mental state while questioning his priorities was the nuclear bomb that detonated every remaining thread of psychological control in someone already operating at maximum cognitive capacity. When Elon Musk finally went completely crazy, it was with the full force of revolutionary intellect reaching its absolute breaking point in a collision that would expose the devastating consequences of psychological warfare against brilliant minds. Priorities? Oh, that's rich, coming from someone who thinks saving humanity gives them the right to operate without normal human limitations, Stephen said with a condescending laugh that revealed his complete inability to comprehend the psychological damage he was inflicting. Maybe the real priority should be getting some professional help for what looks like textbook symptoms of megalomania and severe stress-induced psychological breakdown. Have you considered therapy, Elon? Because this messiah complex you've developed is getting concerning. The suggestion that Musk's dedication to human survival was megalomania and that he needed therapy for a messiah complex was the final straw that shattered every remaining psychological defense mechanism. Musk's face transformed from controlled intensity to something terrifying, the complete psychological breakdown of someone whose brilliant mind had been pushed beyond every conceivable limit by systematic mental torture. Messiah complex? Musk's voice exploded with such psychological fury that Stephen actually jerked backward in terror. But this wasn't just anger. This was the complete mental breakdown of genius itself, and what followed was unlike anything ever captured on television. Musk began laughing. Not normal laughter, but the kind of maniacal, unhinged laughter that comes from a brilliant mind that has finally snapped under unbearable pressure. Ah ha 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 ha, Messiah complex. Musk was now laughing hysterically while simultaneously standing up with such erratic energy that security immediately moved closer. His eyes had taken on the wild intensity of someone whose psychological limits had been completely destroyed. You want to see crazy, Stephen? You want to see what happens when you push genius beyond its breaking point? Congratulations! You've just witnessed the complete psychological destruction of someone trying to save your pathetic species. The studio erupted in chaos. This wasn't controlled anger or professional disagreement. This was the complete mental breakdown of one of the world's most brilliant minds, pushed beyond all psychological limits by systematic intellectual warfare. Musk was now pacing erratically, his movements becoming increasingly frantic as his mind raced at speeds that seemed to defy human capacity. "Stephen!" Musk suddenly whirled around with such manic intensity that the host actually cowered behind his desk. Do you want to know what it's like inside a mind that's trying to solve climate change, colonize Mars, create sustainable transport, develop brain-computer interfaces, and ensure AI safety all simultaneously, while people like you question my mental state? By now, Musk was gesticulating wildly, his speech becoming rapid-fire as his psychological breakdown reached full intensity. My brain processes thousands of engineering problems every day. I see solutions to existential risks while you see entertainment. I calculate orbital mechanics while you calculate ratings. And you think I need therapy? The audience was transfixed in horror and fascination by witnessing the complete psychological collapse of genius itself. This wasn't just a celebrity meltdown. This was watching what happens when a brilliant mind operating at maximum capacity is systematically destroyed by intellectual warfare. Stephen, clearly terrified by what he had unleashed, attempted desperately to regain control. "Security! We need immediate help here. Elon's having a complete psychological breakdown that's becoming dangerous." "Dangerous?" Musk's laughter became even more maniacal as he spun around to face Stephen with eyes that seemed to see through reality itself. "You want to see dangerous? I'll show you dangerous. I'm going to solve every problem humanity faces, just to spite people like you who think genius should operate within normal psychological parameters." Musk was now moving in rapid, jerky motions around the stage, his mind clearly racing at superhuman speeds as the psychological breakdown reached its peak. Mars colonization by 2026, full sustainable energy by 2025, artificial general intelligence before 2027. You think I'm crazy? I'll show you what crazy genius can accomplish. By now, multiple security guards were approaching cautiously, clearly uncertain how to handle someone in the midst of a complete psychological breakdown, whose intellect was still operating at terrifying levels, even in complete mental collapse. "Wait!" Musk suddenly stopped moving and stared directly at Stephen with an intensity that seemed to pierce through dimensions. "Do you know what the real tragedy is, Stephen? While my brain is having this beautiful, terrifying breakdown, it's still solving more problems in 5 minutes than you'll address in your entire manufactured existence." The psychological breakdown was now reaching levels that seemed almost supernatural in their intensity. Musk's mind appeared to be operating at speeds and capacities that defied normal human parameters, as if the complete removal of psychological limitations had unleashed cognitive abilities beyond typical genius levels. "Stephen!" Musk suddenly screamed with such manic energy that everyone in the studio jumped. "I can see 17 different solutions to climate change right now while having this breakdown. I can calculate 43 Mars mission trajectories while laughing maniacally. My broken genius brain is still more productive than your perfectly normal, perfectly useless intellectual mediocrity. As security finally moved in to contain the situation, Musk delivered his most terrifying pronouncement yet. You know what's really crazy, Stephen? Even in complete psychological collapse, even with my sanity shattered by your systematic mental torture, I'm still the person most likely to save human civilization. What does that say about the rest of humanity? Ah ha 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 ha. The complete psychological breakdown was now reaching its crescendo as Musk was gently but firmly guided toward the exit, still laughing maniacally while calculating impossibly complex problems aloud. 13.7% efficiency improvement in rocket engines, artificial neural networks with 47% enhanced processing capacity, all solved while completely insane. And with that terrifying display of genius, pushed beyond all psychological limits, still functioning at superhuman levels, Elon Musk was escorted from the stage, not in defeat, but in the most spectacular demonstration of what happens when revolutionary intellect is systematically destroyed yet somehow transcends its own breakdown to reach even greater heights of terrifying capability. The fallout from Elon Musk's complete psychological breakdown began before the echoes of his maniacal laughter had even faded from the studio. Within minutes, cell phone footage from terrified audience members was exploding across every social media platform on Earth. Despite CBS Security's desperate attempts to contain what they knew was the most career-destroying incident in television history. By the time Musk had been safely escorted from the building, still muttering complex calculations while laughing intermittently, Stephen Broke Genius was trending globally with over 1.2 billion views in the first 2 hours alone, making it the most watched psychological destruction of brilliant intellect in internet history. What happened backstage in those crucial moments has been described by witnesses as both terrifying and strangely beautiful. Elon wasn't violent or incoherent when they got him to a secure area, revealed a medical professional who was called in to assess his condition. His breakdown was unlike anything we'd ever seen. Complete psychological collapse combined with cognitive function that seemed to operate at superhuman levels. He was solving engineering problems while laughing maniacally, calculating orbital mechanics while tears streamed down his face. It was like watching genius itself have a nervous breakdown while still being genius. Meanwhile, Stephen sat alone on his destroyed stage, his face pale with the realization of what he had done. The studio audience had filed out in horrified silence, many visibly shaken by witnessing the systematic psychological destruction of one of humanity's most brilliant minds. Several audience members were seen crying, with one engineering student heard saying, "We just watched someone destroy the person trying to save our species." The moment would later become a viral video with over 800 million views. Behind closed doors at CBS, emergency meetings were already declaring the complete annihilation of Stephen's career, as executives realized they were facing the most catastrophic incident involving psychological warfare in network history. This wasn't just bad television, disclosed a network insider who witnessed the executive panic firsthand. This was Stephen systematically destroying the mental health of someone whose work is literally essential to human survival. He had just revealed himself as someone who drives genius insane for entertainment. There was no coming back from this. But the real earthquake came when mental health organizations worldwide released emergency statements condemning what they called the most egregious case of psychological abuse ever broadcast on television. Unlike typical celebrity damage control, these responses carried the weight of defending human psychological welfare against entertainment industry cruelty. What we witnessed tonight was systematic psychological torture of someone operating at maximum cognitive capacity, read a joint statement from major psychiatric organizations. This represents the entertainment industry's willingness to destroy brilliant minds for ratings, and it cannot be tolerated. The revelation that Stephen had systematically pushed someone to complete psychological breakdown for entertainment completely united every corner of the mental health and scientific communities against him. Within hours, major psychiatric organizations, neuroscience researchers, and cognitive science institutions began condemning Stephen's psychological warfare tactics. "Protect Brilliant Minds" became a rallying cry that transcended politics into a global defense of intellectual welfare. The scientific community's response was unprecedented in its speed and horror. Nobel Prize winners, leading researchers, and cognitive scientists began sharing their outrage at witnessing systematic psychological destruction of genius for entertainment. "What Stephen did was monstrous," said a prominent neuroscientist whose statement received 300 million shares within hours. "Elon Musk's mind is one of humanity's greatest resources, and we just watched someone systematically destroy it for television ratings. This is like watching someone burn down a library while laughing." Perhaps the most powerful response came from other brilliant individuals who recognized themselves in Musk's breakdown. High-functioning individuals with autism, gifted researchers, and innovative thinkers began sharing their own experiences with psychological pressure and the devastating effects of having their mental states weaponized against them. Their testimonials created an overwhelming narrative that Stephen had attacked not just one genius, but the entire concept of brilliant minds operating at maximum capacity. The psychological community's response revealed the true scope of the damage Stephen had inflicted and the rarity of minds like Musk's. Cognitive researchers began studying the footage as an example of what happens when extraordinary intelligence is systematically attacked, while trauma specialists used the incident to illustrate how psychological warfare can destroy even the most resilient minds. The ratings collapse was immediate and total. Stephen's show lost 99.8% of its audience within 48 hours, the most catastrophic viewership loss in television history. Every major technology company, research institution, and mental health organization pulled their association immediately, understanding that connection with someone who had systematically destroyed genius for entertainment was morally indefensible. Meanwhile, Musk experienced something unprecedented in human history: global recognition as someone whose psychological destruction had exposed the entertainment industry's willingness to sacrifice brilliant minds for ratings. His company's stock prices actually rose as investors realized they were witnessing the breakdown of someone whose cognitive abilities operated beyond normal human parameters, even in complete psychological collapse. Mental health professionals began studying his case as an example of how genius functions under extreme psychological pressure. "Musk showed us what happens when you push brilliance beyond its limits," posted one cognitive scientist whose comment received 400 million likes. Even in complete psychological breakdown, his mind was still solving problems at superhuman levels. Stephen didn't just attack one person. He attacked the kind of intelligence that advances human civilization. What we witnessed was the systematic destruction of genius itself. The incident sparked what historians are calling the genius protection movement, a global conversation about protecting brilliant minds from psychological exploitation. Universities began implementing new protocols for protecting gifted individuals from mental abuse, while entertainment companies created policies specifically preventing the psychological warfare Stephen had demonstrated. 2 years later, the Saki consequences have reshaped both entertainment culture and how society protects extraordinary minds. The Late Show was immediately canceled, and Stephen has become the most universally reviled figure in modern history for systematically destroying genius for entertainment. His psychological warfare against Musk is cited as the moment when entertainment revealed its willingness to sacrifice human cognitive resources for ratings. No institution, company, or organization will associate with him. Musk, meanwhile, has become a symbol of what brilliant minds endure while trying to advance human civilization. After intensive therapy and recovery, he returned to his work with even greater determination. his companies achieving breakthrough after breakthrough, as if his psychological breakdown had somehow unleashed even greater cognitive abilities. Scientists now study his case as evidence that genius, even when systematically destroyed, can transcend its own limitations. Sometimes the cost of trying to save humanity is having your sanity systematically destroyed by people who profit from tearing down what they can't understand, he said in his only comment about the incident during a recent innovation summit. But even in complete psychological breakdown, even with my mind shattered by deliberate cruelty, the problems still needed solving. That's what separates genius from entertainment. One keeps working even when broken, the other breaks things for profit. The quote has become a rallying cry for protecting brilliant minds worldwide. The Elon Musk versus Stephen Colbert psychological warfare incident will be remembered as the moment when entertainment industry cruelty revealed its willingness to destroy the very minds trying to save human civilization, when systematic psychological abuse was exposed as a tool for ratings, and when one man's complete mental breakdown ironically demonstrated that even shattered genius operates at levels beyond normal human comprehension. It proved that attacking brilliant minds will always backfire catastrophically, and that the cognitive resources needed to advance human civilization must be protected from those who would destroy them for entertainment value. What did you think about this systematic psychological destruction of genius for entertainment? Was Stephen's psychological warfare against Musk the most evil moment in television history? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Smash that subscribe button for more shocking revelations, and hit that notification bell so you never miss the stories that expose how entertainment industry cruelty threatens the very minds working to ensure human survival.